My name is Daniel Owsiański, and I'm here to share my story on how to craft an agile organization. Yes, and I hope tell a story from my personal experience. Basically, I'm building tech organizations teams for the last 25 years. All of my teams have been tech-based and product-oriented. I'm an engineer by training, but long before that, I was deep into creating software. In fact, I built my first commercial application for Amiga, if anyone remembers. That was probably 92 or 93. The exact date is still up to debate among archaeologists. Before I dive deep and share my findings on how to craft tech organization, I believe that we first need to answer this question, why building tech organization matters in the first place. And I believe the best place to start is probably here. Let's picture how our daily work looks like. On the horizontal axis, we have time. On the vertical axis, we have something that is metric of value of our work. You can think here about anything that makes sense in your particular situation. Maybe, I don't know, number of features released, maybe money earned, maybe lines of code removed from some legacy system. But I guess you know what I mean. Over time, our work looks more or less like this. There are ups and downs. And once we finish one cycle, a new cycle begins. The problem is when we try to pause everything and try to zoom out from this picture to see what is beyond this. When we zoom out far enough, we can see there is little bit more than only just our small team. Probably more teams are around us. And when we look a little bit closer, we can see that there's probably something that we can call a tech organization. So why does building tech organization matters? Well, your teams is part of it, obviously. But on a more serious note, nowadays, software basically eaten the world. It's hard to imagine any kind of business without some kind of software component built in. That, of course, is very pressing on the job market. The demand for software specialists is only growing. And of course, this also attracts lots of people to the field. What is probably interesting that innovation lowered the entry barriers for those new joiners. I'm thinking here about large language models and tools that are results of it. Think about ChatGPT or Copilot. Those tools really helps new joiners to become more efficient much quicker than ever before. But that's not the whole story. After COVID pandemic, remote work became a fact of life. Before that was kind of a probably exotic working method. Right now, we can probably safely say that this is basically norm, especially in technology. However, the problem is that many of the pre-existing blueprints on how to build teams, how to shape our work correctly, slowly became obsolete. And in times like this, I believe it's very good to reach out to the first principles and think, okay, how to improve the reality, how to make those blueprints better. So that's the case of finding the first principles, how to craft tech organization. But since I'm just a single guy standing here, I rather would like to share with you my first principles instead of very generic ones. When I was thinking about what really makes sense about in this regard, I basically see three main categories that make sense for me. I would like to share my findings divided into those categories. So basically, culture, people, and skills. Before we dive in, a word of warning. Yes, this presentation may contain some cheesy quotes made with ChatGPT, so be warned. So let's start with culture. Every organization has it. It's their own way of making things happen, right? And but when things around keep changing faster and faster, I believe that it's much better to have culture that is designed especially for this purpose, instead of being just a random result of people's actions that we have on board. So that's why I think about culture in the first place. So the question is, what is the first principle here? I believe that I always need to know why and what I want to build. My personal experience here is that quite often behind all those fancy business jargon or business books, there are basically something very similar to the iron triangle from project management. You basically have 3 levers to use. Either you think about organization size or level of mastery that organization will have to have, or finally about money, either earn or spend. So that's the first principle. The next one is, once I know what and why, it's good to validate this with the reality around us. It's probably quite easy to imagine that if you only have sticks and stones, it's quite hard to build a rocket ship. But from my experience, it's even harder to build a trust-based organization in heavily microcontrolled environment, micromanaged environment. Another mistake I made several times in the past was aiming absolutely too high without notion about reality around me. So instead of building something that allows organization to survive, I of course wanted to build something absolutely and awesome. I also like to use innovation tokens as a trick or technique to validate the goals that I set before. If you haven't heard about it, innovation tokens is kind of a mental model when you start with a limited number of these innovation tokens, let's say 3, and you spend them making decisions on, for example, picking new shiny tech, or new working method, or some new tool that I would like to try in your organization. The problem with these innovation tokens is that supply of them is fixed for a very long time, and once you spend the token, is basically gone. Something that I find surprisingly important is when I know what, why, and I checked everything with the surrounding reality. I found that it's pretty important to also to check whether or not I really know how to embark on this journey to make sure that I know how to navigate this ship to the safe port. For example, imagine that all is set up, and I know at this point that all I need is extra trust from stakeholders, and I don't have this trust, or maybe I need some set of skills from people that in reality I don't have access to. All those things is worth checking before we press this start button. Once we do, it's time to focus on people. I must admit that I found this quote quite hilarious. Of course, I bet you all see the essence of it, right? Basically, it says that intrinsic motivation of people trumps everything else that we can imagine. It may probably sound like it these days. But acting on it, in my opinion, is something that truly matters. So let's think about people's perspective. Well, obviously, hiring according to the plan sounds like a very crazy idea, but in reality, it's pretty obvious. But it means also that obviously I need to be involved in this hiring process personally, without outsourcing this to anyone around in the organization. Obviously, it also means that I need to be aware of all those cracking the interview books when I set up questions to ask. And obviously, I also need to have very clear picture what does it mean to feed the organization. The next principle I have on my list is this one. I find this as a pretty interesting finding. You may wonder, what is a tribe-binding story? In essence, it's a story that brings all of us together by sharing the same values and beliefs. This is something that is rooted very deeply in us humans for a very long time, probably from days. So tribe-binding story is this story. And the question is how this works in practice. I prepared a few examples to share with you. I will start with something that we are using in my current company. It's a book titled Extreme Ownership, written by former Navy SEALs commanders. And the book itself isn't unique in grand scheme of things. It's basically a collection of war stories that illustrates the importance of ownership, of taking ownership of everything around you, above and below you. It also highlights how important is to really think about mistakes, really think about mistakes and errors that we did, but not for blame games, rather to find how to fix this in future. Basically, you as this member of the team are responsible for taking ownership of everything around you. We inside my team are using this as a reference point to tell others what we value as a group. Of course, I cannot claim that we absolutely own everything in our space, but this is something that really unites my tech team, and I believe this is our tribe-binding story. The next example is from totally different category. A few years ago, the handbook for new employees leaked out from the gaming company Valve. Whether or not that was controlled leak, it's up to debate. The fact is that back in time, industry was astounded. Valve was already known for hits like Portal, Half-Life, or Steam platform, but the manual was absolutely wonderful piece of art with a wonderful illustration. Basically, sold the whole culture of Valve. What was unique back in the day was that Valve basically told a very boldly statement that whole bureaucracy and hierarchy basically destroys all essence of creativity in people's brains. They really avoid to have any kind of mid-level management. Everyone is expected to surprise take ownership as well. And the book sounds like a handbook for new employees, but in fact tells the story from the company perspective. Of course, it's not very hard to imagine that for developers worldwide, that was really interesting story for them. They really wanted to be the part of this tribe. And other side of this was that industry also started to discuss maybe there are other ways to build culture. Maybe there are other ways to structure teams. Fun fact from my perspective is that was or is the first place when I spotted this abbreviation for working from home. For them, back then, that was something that was absolutely option for people to do. The last example, and the least example, is something that some of you probably may recognize from your personal experiences. Core values. Companies quite often at some point try to build this tribe-binding story by finding the core values that makes everything works as it is right now. The problem is that this top-to-bottom approach quite often ends with some nice posters and motivational quotes, but very rarely in changing people's behaviors or actions. I added this example here because I would like to show you the bigger picture. I believe that when the core values are done right, it really captures the essence of tribe-binding story. Unfortunately, this is very rare sight in reality. So let's sum up what tribe-binding story is. It's a way for team to say, this is us. This is a story that a team likes to discuss about. This is a story that allows team to survive some rough patches or navigate some unknown territories. This is the power of story. The next principle is to know my peers. Of course, you may think right now, what kind of finding is that? Pretty obvious one. But I don't have, in this point on mind, all those cheesy exercises that you probably know from team building events. I'm referring here to a set of tools that exist on the market that allow you to dive deeper into how we as a people operate, how we as a team operate. Those diagnostic tools, there are several of them on the market. My favorite one is Gallup Clifton Strengths. This tool is basically based on very smart assumption that people work far better when they focus on their strengths instead of fighting with weaknesses. The tool itself assigns 34 unique talents from most dominant to least dominant to each person. There are not good or bad talents. Everything is valuable. Every single individual basically have different set of those talents. The question is, how does it help in team setting? Well, in fact, this is a game changer, and we know this from our reality at Bolt. Because once we have this access to this kind of knowledge, we can, for example, assign tasks not on based on hierarchy or assumed abilities. We can just check, okay, this is the strengths for this particular person to be this taskmaster, master, for example, or to do other things. And using this tool, Clifton Strengths, as a navigation tool in this regard, really helps us not only be far more productive, but also, of course, everyone is far more happier with daily work. The next topic is something that relates to tech very strictly. But before you roll your eyes, I don't want to show you any source code or features to compare. I would rather like you to stop for a second and think what really is a tech stack. In my opinion, tech stack is a combination of trade-off, constraints, and creative decisions made by authors of this tech stack. Most of the time, we are rather on the other side of this equation. Our teams are users of the tech stack. For those people, tech stack basically represent a set of norms, beliefs, and expected behaviors that they decided to adhere. Why tech stack really matters? When we think about it in this broader perspective, it basically redefines or can redefine several of the topics that you see on the screen. First, skills. Different tech stacks can have different definition of what is skill or majority of the skills or how the skills progress. Different tech stacks definitely have different best practices. So it's hard to unite them, for example, across the whole organization. Different tech stack sometimes also play different with priorities. Some of them more value the mastery, other more value the unit of work, what the value is created by the unit of work. And of course, economics, I guess, pretty obvious one, the size of the talent pool, dynamic of this talent pool, and of course, cost acquiring talent. The last principle I want to mention is especially valid in larger organizations. Sometimes we have this feeling that HR is more focused on resources than humans, and we can be forced to use some cookie-cutter policies without the regard of software-specific reality, and so on and so forth. So at this point, it's good to be just aware of risk related to HR. It's not always something that really can help us. That concludes people's category. Let's move to the final one, skills. Building the right skill set, in my opinion, is probably the hardest part of building or crafting tech organization. Quite often, it requires effort both from the organization as well as from individuals that want those skills. I think I know why, and I will try to explain you right now. Let's start with much wider context. Throughout the human history, the only required skills were those that allowed us to survive. This small box on the right side basically represents the whole progress of humans, from agricultural revolution to the present day. And when we look closer, this small white rectangle basically represents 20th century to today. Let's zoom in on this small period. When we see skills from those two periods side by side, obviously we see a large difference between them. The problem is that on the right side, we have age of specialization, 20th century approach to the skills needed in the workplace. And the problem is that our whole education system is basically rigged for this. And we were taught all those things in school. Problem is that what we have on the other side is modern era age of adaptability. And none of the skills that our work requires is probably taught or was taught in school. So when I think about skills, what to perfect when we craft tech organization, I find this one This one as the most crucial. Critical thinking, in my opinion, is something that really can make the difference right now. Knowing the difference between opinion and a fact, knowing how biases and fallacies can influence our decision process is something that really can help us in our daily work, since most of our work is basically making decisions. The next skill I have on this list is to keep my and my team's mind open to learn new things. It's not always some urge to learn new things is enough. Sometimes we need to put a lot of effort to create enough space and time for people to really learn new things, and of course fight to give them access to people that are much smarter than we are to improve this process. And the last topic I have on this list is just keeping focus on our progress and productivity. Nowadays, it's getting harder and harder to be productive. We have so many attention thieves around us that it really requires us to focus on this and do some extra work to make sure that the productivity is kept on the level that we want to have. But on the other side, I believe that keeping a healthy distinction between work and life is pretty important. That allows us to think, okay, how to improve processes around us, and also can allow us to safeguard the attention and focus together. When we see those skills presented here, as I mentioned before, none of them probably were taught in your school. We all had to pick them up as we go during our professional lifetime. That's why it's so hard to make those skills work in a real life environment. That concludes the three categories I want to show you and share my findings today. Now you probably can think, okay, but what's the point of this? This is Agile conference after all. How this connects to me? And in fact, I see the connection quite clearly. You, the Agile crowd, are the most diverse members of the technology world. Many of you have some prior work experience totally unrelated with tech. That makes you people that have totally different perspective on things that are happening in your work. But even keeping this aside, your daily work basically requires dealing with your teams. So you can be the guys who influence the tribe binding story for your teams. You can be the guys who teach your teams what skills they have to master or would like to have mastered. So those things are, from my opinion, the key topics that really makes you somehow special in this regard, to really look for those new blueprints in the reality that we have right now to find out what the future of workplaces can be. Thank you.
So we have a couple questions for you. That's not everything. You cannot run away. First, how big are organizations that you created? How do you make sure the tribe binding story is common across the tribe?
Okay, how big? I'm thinking about size from small teams, so probably 4 or 5 people, to the size that we have right now in Volt. I guess this is 150 people in tech, and we're growing very rapidly. So the plan is to have far more people till the end of this year. And the second part of the question was how I make sure that tribe binding story works.
Yes, the works, and it's the same across the whole team.
Mm-hmm. I guess this is something that is similar to pornography. You know it when you see it. So if this works, you basically know it works. What is, I would say, even more important is to have this story as something that you can reflect to. So if someone really don't know how to behave in a particular situation, since we have this tribe binding story, we can always reflect to this. I'm right now trying to recollect some events on this extreme ownership base. That's how we use this book as well. This is the ownership we expect from you as a guy working with our team. So in case that you don't know how to operate, probably take ownership of everything that is around, above and below you.
Okay, thank you. I hope that's answered the question. The next question is, usually we are not in the environment that we have everything in our hands. So how to avoid anti-human HR?
Since I'm an engineer, probably, you know, from electricity, isolation is the only way that we can probably use here. But on more serious note, quite often it's a lack of knowledge, not some on-purpose actions put on us. Maybe this HR really don't understands what does it mean to craft software. Maybe some extra story about it, how hard it is to really figure out what to build next, makes this software feel so unique. So that's how I'd like to approach. That's how I approach this. So rather talk and explain to people, because this is something that is on the border between something hard like tech and something very soft like HR. And I believe that quite often we can find some kind of bridge between those two words.
Thank you. The next question. An exercise to create a binding story, devs and ops teams, for example.
Okay. One of the beliefs that I don't put on a slide is that we right now living in the era of abundance. There's probably all the answers are already being answered. So I would say just pick something and use it. Pick extreme ownership as an example and just try to apply it without looking for something that is perfect in every imaginable angle. From my perspective, having this done halfway is much better than just thinking about something perfect in the future that won't happen.
Thank you. And the last one, innovation tokens. You mentioned them at the beginning. What limits innovation tokens and how to discover that we already spent all of them?
Okay. As I said, this is just a mental model, just a mental exercise. And having limited number, I was thinking, why exactly 3 makes this magic here? I believe that this is kind of a smart way of explaining that using one of those tokens is easy. When we use 2, we slowly start to build network. When we use 3, we have this network, but it's relatively small. But if we think about having, I don't know, 10 or 20 of those tokens, then basically all the magic disappears, because you have so dense a network of decisions that you made that basically it doesn't help. So from my perspective, it's rather a tool to limit us in our creativity on this. So yeah, I want to use this very shiny new tech stack, for example, and that's 1 token gone. I want to make sure that we, in some special ways, optimize our online meeting. 1 token gone. So that's how I think about it.
Okay. And a particular story from your life that you would like to share with us, or success story, or the failure story during the building tech culture.
Probably too many of them, and we are recording this, so that's another aspect that.
So the success story.
Maybe the success story will be like this. Once I had a very smart engineer in my team, and our whole story was that we really want to be the best of the best in this particular space. And the guy was really good, and so looked like a total match made in heaven. We want to be the best. The guy is absolutely fits us. And then one day he approaches me and says, "You know what? I think I want to work for Apple." And for me that was kind of I would say blowback, because okay, we're building something that is so unique and so wonderful, and then one of my best engineers I ever knew basically want to bail out on me. But then I try to think about in this broader perspective that basically that's how you create something that is unique and very good, that people are not afraid to move from this stage to another stage, maybe without you. And that was the case for me. That was on one side not so happy, but on the other side I felt somehow okay as a creator of the culture, that I allowed our guys to think way beyond our Polish borders, and think way outside of the box that we have here. And the guy is one of the key engineers that working on iOS right now.
Thank you. Next question. There are last two. One is more difficult, the second one is easy. Does extreme ownership principle relates to the leader or its culture principle for everyone in the organization?
I know it's the hardest one.
That's the hardest one.
No, it's not that. Well, I use extreme ownership during the interview process, and quite often I have this kind of chit chat, and the person on the other side suddenly realized that taking the ownership really can be applied in everything that relates to the work that he expected to do in our company. It's not something that relates to leadership. I tend to think about it that, of course, it differs depending on the level that you are. But if you are just junior developer, probably ownership in your case can mean that you try to look outside your assigned task and try to figure out, okay, what can I do better? Or who can I ask about how to improve my work? That's ownership on this level. On my level, ownership is to protect what we have already built and make sure that while we're growing, nothing significantly breaks.
Okay, the easy question. What was the Amiga game that you built?
That was a puzzle game based on some TV show, I guess, back in the day. But I have my internal mission right now to find the source code of this and publish, because I found this game on some old site and with small note that source is not available. And I know that I have this source somewhere, so I will have to search for it.
Thank you very much. Huge applause for Daniel.
Thank you.